Hello and welcome. My name is Rima, اسمي ريما عجيل. I've been in Canada for 11 years and we're doing this session today with Incubate. So thank you for making this session possible. We're all volunteers doing this from SILA's side, but Incubate are giving their time for free to give us this session. Thank you for all the attendees and for the people who have joined us today or who will watch the link later on. We hope this session will be useful for you. I just want to talk to you quickly about the Zoom etiquette and the logistics. So the session will be in English and it will be recorded. Your cameras will be off and microphones will be muted during the presentation part. However, at the end of the session, if you wish to ask your question directly, we will be able to unmute you. So please stick around for the last part because we have around 15 minutes of questions, so you'll be able to ask your questions then. In the meantime, if you want, you can type your questions in the chat box. Just know that for all the people who sent us their questions previously, a lot of those questions will be answered throughout the presentation, and other questions will be tackled at the end. As usual, stay tuned because we always organize more webinars and workshops related to topics of immigration or integration, everything related to Canada and Lebanon. And lastly, we're going to share with you a feedback form link at the end so that you give us your opinion. And like this, you know, we can see what your interests are in terms of tackling other topics in the future. Now I want to tell you more about SILA. It's not going to be long. So SILA, yeah, thank you. It stands for Support and Integration for Lebanese Abroad, Soutien et Intégration des Libanais à l'étranger. We are a registered NGO, and we're based in Montreal. And we're all volunteers in SILA. We do this because basically, we're all involved in this. We've been through it, so we know what other people are going through, and we want to help out. We officially launched on the 4th of August, 2021. So it's after the Beirut explosion. And we offer support in immigration, integration for newcomers, and we also have intercultural exchange and growth, which is basically our in-person events or anything related to people who need help in connecting and loving Canada more while they are here. So you can follow us on our Facebook and Instagram pages. Joelle is going to post the links. And if you need to contact us, please do so via the web form. So we have a form, you fill it out and we get an email. Or you can also become a member if you live in Canada and or in Lebanon and you want to help out any way you can, or you want to know more news about us, or you can even volunteer. So now on to our webinar for today. We have Maria Garces and Francine Francis من Lebanon. So they are both, they work with Incubate. Maria is a regulated Canadian immigration consultant who joined Incubate in October 2019. And she has specialized in a wide range of immigration services, and she helps her clients meet their immigration goals. Francine, she joined Incubate in 2020. And she's, as a Lebanese, she speaks English, French, and Arabic. She moved to Toronto recently after being based in Lebanon. So she was working with Incubate from Lebanon. And she's able now to connect with her clients from the Middle East while being based in Toronto. She specializes in permanent residency programs. They'll tell you more later on in the presentation. I wanted to point out one thing that's important for us as SILA. We cannot talk about immigration without immigration consultants. And we really want to thank Incubate for doing this for free, because all the advice that they're giving you today is for free. And it's an opportunity for you to ask your questions directly. It's not necessary for you to think that you need to hire an immigration consultant in order to immigrate. I've done the process on my own. A lot of us have. but it's important for you to know the information from the official sources, and that's why we do this session. So Maria is going to go through the programs that you can consider, including the express entry pathways and the provincial nominees. But we're also going to talk about how you can immigrate with your French, which is a new program that has been opened that as Lebanese with French you can consider. Also, we're going to talk about programs from other provinces, not necessarily to stick with Quebec and Ontario. And we really thank you for sharing those important insights and tips with us today. Joelle is going to post the links for Encubate if you want to know more about them or check their credentials. And now I'll just pass the mic to Francine. Thank you, Francine, and take it from here.
So hi everyone and welcome to this webinar. Thank you Rima. So اسمي فرانسين وأنا Immigration Solution Specialist بإنكوبيت من 2020. So الهدف من السيشن اليوم هو نحكي عن الهجرة الدائمة من خلال بروجرامات الإكسبرس أنتري. So Federal Skilled Worker Programs, Canadian Experience Class PNP أو Provincial Nominee Programs. ومن خلال برامج PNP يلي مش فايتة تحت الإكسبرس أنتري سيستم. بالأخص البرامج specific للفرنش speaking skilled workers برات كيباك. رح نحكي كمان عن الهجرة المؤقتة من خلال occupation specific immigration والLMIA كود C16 ورح نفسر عن الدراز الجديد يلي صاروا من كم شهر ويلي بلشت فيهم RCIC actually من كم شهر يلي بيستهدفوا الفرنش speakers الهيلث كيرز والSTEM professionals trades and transportation professions وبالآخر رح نجاوب على الأسئلة يلي عندكم إياها. قبل ما نبلش رح أعرف على السريع على Encubate. Encubate شركة استشارات للهجرة أسسها باسل سنة 2013. باسل هو Licensed Principal Consultant بإنكوبيت أو المستشار المرخص له. ماريا يلي موجودة معنا اليوم هي كمان Licensed Consultant بإنكوبيت، صار لها بالشركة من 2019 وحاليا موجودة بمكاتبنا بفانكوفر. ماريا عندها خبرة كبيرة ببرامج ومتطلبات الهجرة الدائمة وكمان المؤقتة على كندا، وهدفها تلاقي البرنامج اللي بيناسب كل شخص حسب ظروفه أو الباك جراوند تبعه. التيم تبعنا جاي من بلدان مختلفة وثلاث أرباعنا بالمبدأ إجا على كندا أما من خلال الإقامة الدائمة أو من خلال الإقامة المؤقتة. أنا شخص منهم. فبنفهم كتير منيح شو عم تمرقوا فيه مثل ما دايما بقول بهدول السيشنز. Encubate عندها Encubate عندها 3 licensed consultants، باسل بتورونتو، إيزابيل بمونريال وماريا بفانكوفر. هن مرخصين يا من حكومة كندا الفيدرالية يا من حكومة كيباك يا من الاثنين. وعندنا 4 مكاتب بكندا. زيادة عن تورونتو مونريال وفانكوفر في عندنا مكتب جديد بس مش كتير جديد بكالجاري. من سنة 2013 لهلا اشتغلنا على آلاف طلبات الهجرة الدائمة والمؤقتة مثل إذن دراسة، إذن مزاولة العمل وما إلى آخره. فالتيم تبعنا عنده خبرة كبيرة بهدول البرامج وفيه يساعدكم ب5 لغات يلي هن الإنجليزي، الفرنساوي، العربي، الإسباني والبرتغيز. وهلا رح نبلش الجزء الأهم من هالسيشن مع ماريا. ماريا, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Francine. For my lack of Arabic, I think I understood a good chunk of everything that you said. All right, so we're going to be switching to English, but if you feel more comfortable asking any questions at the end of the presentation in Arabic or French, Francine and the team can help us with translating them. So as Rima just introduced, we're going to be focusing today on permanent residency avenues, permanent residency pathways to Canada. We could be talking about this for hours. So we have summarized this into the main pathways that we see that work for our clients. And we're going to have special focus on recent updates from IRCC. It's an always changing environment. It's an always changing industry. So we'll keep you posted with the latest news. and also special focus on Francophone immigration, since it's a hot topic right now for those looking to immigrate outside of Quebec. So let's just dive in. There we go, perfect. All right, so in summary, these are the main pathways for immigration, or that we have found to summarize based on all the programs that are available provincially and federally. We can come to Canada through temporary residence, either student or worker, and then work our ways to permanent residency. We can also immigrate without even coming to Canada if we come with the necessary skill sets, language, and experience, so as a skilled professional through one of the federal or provincial programs. We could also come as entrepreneurs or business immigrants, so through investment. And then under the family categories, we have the spousal sponsorship. We could be sponsored by our spouses if they are Canadian permanent residents or citizens. And then family migration under one of the available programs, such as the parent and grandparent program. And lastly, the last category here through refugee or asylum. Now we're going to be focusing on the skilled professional route, so the first two slots that I just mentioned. So immigrating to Canada through your experience, your languages, your skill set, and your potential education and experience in Canada. So a subdivision of this that we have summarized, that we have put together, starting with languages. Languages is the most important factor whenever we're determining our likelihood of getting invited to apply for permanent residence in Canada. As of today, and because of the high points both at a federal and a provincial level, we will require an advanced level in one of the languages in combination with other factors. But it gets even better if we look at the second one and we could demonstrate the two official languages in Canada, English and French, at least at an intermediate level combined. We also have the option of studying in a public institution, public post-secondary institution, that would allow us to go through a provincial program or gain valuable work experience after graduation. Also through work experience in Canada, both federally and provincially, we'll talk about this, or by having a job offer in Canada, or what's becoming very popular or what's been working for the past few years, if we have experience in what we call an in-demand occupation. So our experience, whether that's back home or in Canada, is demanded both at a federal or at a provincial level. And we're going to be talking about this in the next few slides. Just to summarize the three main levels of selection. So when it comes to permanent residency under the economic class, so again, using our skill sets, languages, experience, education, and so on, we see three main levels of selection. For 90% of the programs, we need to get invited to apply. We need to receive an invitation from the government in order to apply for permanent residency. So there's that first step of us telling to the government, whether that's to the federal or the provincial government, hey, I'm interested in immigrating. We do that by creating a profile for one of their different what we call EOI systems. And these are the three main levels of selection. We have the federal level of selection, in which we can get directly invited by RCIC, by the federal government, and then the entire application gets processed by them. We can also get selected at a provincial level, so we get invited by a province, just like they have the legislation and authority to over their education and their healthcare system. They also have a say on the immigration system and who that comes to that province. So for that, they create provincial programs. Most cases, we have to show ties to that province. But if we get selected through a province, we're looking at two steps. We're looking at first processing the application with the province and later on with the federal government. So it tends to take a little longer, but it is a great alternative for those where, for example, federal option does not work anymore. And then if we are looking to immigrate to Quebec, if we have intentions to reside in Quebec, we can go through one of their programs, whether through the RIMA system or the PEQ program, but it will require us to have French proficiency. So we're going to look into these three levels. I'll start with the federal one, more specifically express entry. So express entry has been in place for over 8 years now, almost 9 years next January, and it replaced an old system by introducing what we call the best in first out. So it's a point-based system that selects the top tier, the top ranked candidates from an express entry pool, a pool of candidates. These points get awarded based on what we call selection factors. We'll check in the next slide. And processing time, you know, when it was initially introduced, we're looking at 6 months. Because of the pandemic, we've seen some delays. Right now, we're looking at 9 months. It's the new average for express entry applications. Now, just like I mentioned, we need to first receive that invitation to apply in order for us to formalize the application. So that very first step of telling the government, hey, I'm interested in immigrating, is called submitting an EOI, an expression of interest. We do that through the system. It's a complete digital system. And we answer a series of questions that will award us points based on these factors. These are the 4 key selection factors. We can get additional points for factors such as adaptability, transferability, skills, but these are the core factors that will determine our final score. Starting with languages, as I mentioned, the most important factor. We're going to talk later on into what are the available tests that you can take, but you can do either English or French. They're both equally accepted under express entry as a primary language. Second one is education. Whether it is completed outside or inside Canada, we get awarded points for our level of education. And if it's outside Canada, we need to go through a process called ECA, Educational Credential Assessment, to equalize those foreign studies into Canadian studies. Number 3 is work experience, whether that's outside or inside Canada, as long as it's considered qualified under the tier system. This is a system that classifies occupations based on different levels. We have 6 different levels, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And the only ones considered qualified for immigration purposes due to the amount of training, experience, and managerial skill set that require are 0, 1, 2, and 3. So this is something very important to check whenever you're about to create your profile or whenever you're about to check whether your experience is qualified or not. Always make sure that it falls under 0, 1, 2, or 3 levels. And lastly, age, unfortunately, is a factor that also affects our score, but it does not mean that once we reach 30, we are done, we cannot immigrate to Canada anymore. It just means that the moment we start losing points, we will have to, for age, we will have to compensate with other factors. We'll look into the draws in a second, but as of right now, we're looking at a very high score. The pool is very competitive, and I will explain in a second why. I will skip this one because it makes sense in the next few slides. All right. Now, this is part of those news that I was mentioning at the beginning of the presentation that have been taking place into the express entry system. Up until June of this year, express entry solely selected candidates based on the score. Of course, we have to ensure that we have the right credentials, the right experience, languages, but the draws, the rounds of invitations that take place every 2 to 3 weeks, will select candidates based on the score. They will determine a score range, and the government will issue certain amount of invitations. This changed as of June of this year, and the government introduced a new way of selecting candidates as well, in parallel with the general draws. So this new way, this category-based draws, does not replace the current draw system, the general draws. It runs in parallel with it. Category-based draws, what they're asking us is for certain experience in occupations, in professions that are currently in demand. As Francine was mentioning earlier in the presentation, they have determined 6 categories for 2023. These will get updated every year. So we expect 2024 to be similar, not too different, but just, you know, these are dynamic. These will change based on market trend changes and labor shortages across all Canada. Now, my favorite one, a category base that was introduced under these specific draws, is the French language proficiency. If we can demonstrate an upper intermediate level of French, a CLB7, through one of the accepted tests, we are eligible to be a candidate under these new draws. And I'll show you in a second the table with very promising numbers. And then the rest of categories, so healthcare occupations, if we have experience in one of these occupations that's already set by the government, STEM, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics, trade, transportation, and agriculture and agri-food positions. These are the categories for this year. And in order for us to be considered a candidate under these categories, we need to have in the past 3 years, whenever we create a profile, at least 6 months of continuous work experience in one of these occupations under these categories. So you don't have to create an extra express entry. This will run in parallel with your express entry profile. But if you do happen to have any of these categories, then you may get an invitation to apply and can formalize your application. Now, these are the rounds of invitations that have been taken place since it was introduced in June. As you can see, they focused on healthcare a lot, but mostly in French. French, it is a priority for the federal government to increase Francophone immigration outside of Quebec, and they do that through categories, through draws like this. As you can see, the lowest, and this is the lowest we've seen a federal skilled worker draw ever. They issue, so July, 3,800 invitations for a cut-off score of 375 for those who could demonstrate at least that CLB 7 in French. So this was great news. They kept issuing for French and then other categories as well. But it just comes to say the importance and really the asset that the French language represents for immigrating into Canada. We'll talk more about this in the next few slides. And then these are the non-specific or the non-category based draws. As you can see, it still remains active. They're still issuing invitations, but the score has increased quite a lot just because more allocation is given to the category based draws. All right. Something that I do want to highlight as well is the importance of language. So by mastering, I was mentioning at the beginning, by being able to demonstrate that advanced level in one of the languages, we can really double our points for transferability in work experience and education. And something that I do want to mention here is that for each official language, we can demonstrate or we can prove that level through different language tests. For English, IRCC accepts the IELTS general training and the CELPIP general test. And I am aware that some of these centers are overbooked for the next months and not as accessible. But just a quick tip here that if you do have the chance to travel to the UAE, for example, Dubai now offers CELPIP tests that you can try and take it as an alternative to IELTS. All right, as work experience, like I mentioned earlier, in order for us to consider that as qualified, it needs to be in a tier 0, 1, 2, or 3. And something important as well, that it needs to be paid. We need to be able to demonstrate that we were paid for the position, and we have at least 12 consecutive months of work experience if it's outside Canada. In terms of funds, this is another requirement for most programs, especially the federal skilled worker one, and some provincial programs will go by this table as well. And we need to be able to demonstrate that we have these funds in our bank account or our spouses at the time of application, but also at the time that our application is processed and at the time of landing.
Maria, just a quick
Yes.
question here about the money. Do you know if there's still the issue of the Lebanese pound and the USD? How is it working now in terms of the Lebanese proving their funds? Do you know the latest trends? What's been accepted based on the cases that you guys manage?
Mm-hmm. So, and Francine can help me here if I'm forgetting anything, but we have not seen any special requirements from IRCC in Lebanon on this specifically. As long as we can demonstrate the funds in a bank account. The most important thing is, and I know this is challenging for some people, but that to demonstrate that the funds have been there for the past 6 months. So we need to provide 6 months of bank statements. And if there's any large deposits, any large sums that come in because we had that money in cash, then we have to provide proof to the officer where this money came from. So for example, if this came from your work and you were cashing that money that you were getting as your pay stub or your work paid, then we would have to provide a proof of pay stubs, pay slips, and receiving that money from the employer. So in some cases, we do highlight and explain the situation, but it has not presented a problem so far on the applications that we have submitted. Okay. All right. So now I do want to focus a little bit more on how to obtain qualified Canadian work experience. Some of you may have the plan of immigrating to Canada, but your short-term plan, your immediate action that you want to take is to come first to Canada. For that, we will need to consider coming as a temporary resident, because although permanent resident can run on the site, permanent residency applications, these can take a little longer, especially going through a provincial program. So other alternatives that you have to actually come to Canada as workers are these list of potential work permits. So I'm not going to go through all of them here. We've just summarized let's call them the more popular ones. But I do want to highlight the Canadian interest one, specifically the Francophone Mobility LMIA exemption code C16. So for those of you who are not familiarized with work permits, we have the option of applying for open or closed work permits. Open most likely will come in the form of graduating from a public institution and applying for the famous post-graduation work permit, or coming as an accompanying spouse of international student or a worker in Canada. So in most cases, we will have to focus on closed work permits, which are issued based on having a job offer. And now these closed work permits or this job offer can be either supported by an LMIA process, which I'll explain in the next slide, so the employer will sponsor us, or can be exempted from this LMIA based on certain skills that we can demonstrate, for example, that Francophone mobility, or based on international agreements. Unfortunately, Lebanon does not have an international agreement with Canada as of today, but if you have another nationality, we could see if your other nationality does. In short, the LMIA process, the sponsorship process from an employer in Canada, is actually less complex than what everyone thinks. We just need to have the employer on board and explain to them the process in detail. But in summary, what this process involves is the employer demonstrating to the government that they have tried recruiting from the Canadian labor market. They were unable to find someone with that specific skill set, which, by the way, it's very realistic. There's a big demand for many positions in many industries across Canada. So it's actually a challenge for employers to find workers in certain industries. So this process has become more realistic for employers to prove that there's really a need to hire foreign nationals. And then once that part is done with the employment branch of the government, ESDC, we can go ahead and apply for our work permits. And then our family can join us as well with open work permits and study permits for the kids. All right, I will skip this one because we did discuss it quickly. All right, and then just before we summarize provincial nominee programs, just want to quickly, again, retouch on the French part. So we talked about the category-based specific draws for Francophone speakers, so those who have at least that upper intermediate level in French. On top of this, we get 50 bonus points for having French as the second language or as a first language in combination with English. So as long as it's in that upper intermediate level. And we also get access to that LMIA exemption code C16, the one that I was just mentioning. What this really means is that our employer, should we have a job offer outside of Quebec, our employer does not need to go through the process of proving that they've tried to recruit someone. They are exempted from that process, and hence we can go ahead and, as an applicant, apply directly for a closed work permit under this exemption code. What we need to meet here is demonstrate a CLB 5 in French, and this can be shown through French language proficiency tests or proof that you've completed secondary or post-secondary education in French. We're also accepting that as a proof nowadays. And what's even more appealing with these new changes of C16 is that the job offer can be in any occupation as long as the employer is outside of Quebec. So we're no longer just looking at tier 0, 1, 2, 3 qualified occupation. It can be in any occupation, upper basic or lower intermediate level of French outside of Quebec. We can apply for that work permit. Now, we talked about federal, we talked about French, how to utilize it. Remember in the first slide, I did give you that brief of the different selection levels. Now we're looking into provincial programs and how we can get selected based on one of these factors. So again, provincial selection level, we first get selected by the province. They check our credentials, our experience, our language, and then once they approve that application, they give us a certificate of nomination. And with this certificate, we go and apply for permanent residence with the federal government. Now, there are over 60 provincial programs available as of today. We're obviously not going to be able to cover them all, but every province has anything from 4 to 8 categories, and they target specific skilled individuals or students that will benefit or that will contribute to the economy of that province. In summary, these are the main avenues or the main programs that we tend to find across all provinces. But once again, every province has their own requirements and their own subcategories. So we could get selected through a program based on having experience in an occupation that's in demand, similar to what the government is doing at a federal level. Provinces like Ontario, Saskatchewan, Alberta, New Brunswick do offer this pathway, and in most cases, it has to be an occupation tier 0, 1, 2, or 3. We also could, there we go. We also could go through a provincial program by having a job offer from an employer in that province. Some provinces accept certain occupations, others don't have a restriction on type of occupation as long as it's in the province. This one is actually available across all provinces. Also, by having work experience in that province, there are programs that will require us to have anything from 9 to 12 months of experience with a certain employer in that province, and later on allow us to apply through the provincial program. And just so you know, this is LMIA exempted. This job offer is extended through a contract and through the commitment of the employer. And lastly, studying in a public college, in a public university, public institution, post-secondary outside of Quebec. I want to say yes, all provinces do offer this option as well, as long as the program is at least 8 months in length. Some provinces will vary on this length, so we have to check one by one, but it's also another option that is offered across Canada as well. Some example of these are the Ontario Immigrant Mini Program. This one specifically is for French speakers, so we will require a combination of, let me just go this one. Yes, we'll require a combination of English and French, French at an upper intermediate level, English at an intermediate level. We need at least a bachelor's degree or equivalent and at least 1 year of experience. The score range has actually dropped a lot. And although there was a period of time where they were only selecting certain occupations, it went back to being general draws, as you can see in this next slide here. So the score dropped as little as 308 points the past month, and it's been within the range of 340s, 350s to early 400s. So this one works with express entry, and again, it's another great alternative for us to go through a provincial program if the federal selection system, if express entry, it's too high, the points are too high for us. Okay, this is just an example of one of the provincial programs. As you can see, they're very active. We see draws every month. Another example is through the province of New Brunswick. This one also works with express entry. I'm not going to go in depth with all the details, but these are the available programs through this specific province. They have the strategic initiative stream, which is actually dedicated for those who speak French. So we need to demonstrate a certain level of French proficiency. Right now, they're not issuing invitations as of today. They're still processing applications from previous months, but it has been a program that has worked really well and that once again works with the federal government to select those candidates. These are just a couple examples of provincial programs. As I mentioned, there's over 60 available programs as of today, and they could all, mean you could be eligible for more than one province. Something that I do want to highlight is that the fact that you immigrate to a province does not tie you to that province for life. But we need to demonstrate ties and we need to demonstrate intentions to immigrate to that province when we first apply. If for any reason after we come to Canada, after spending a few months in the province, you realize that you find another job in another province or it's not what you expected, that is totally fine. Once again, you're not attached to that province for life. And the last level of selection before we move into the questions, I'm trying to really stick to the time here, is through Quebec. So Quebec has a different selection system, but something to understand is that ultimately the government that will approve or that will grant us that permanent residence is the federal government, it's IRCC. So whether we get selected directly through IRCC, through a province, or through Quebec, the government of Canada, IRCC, will be the ones that check the last steps of applications, admissibilities, medical, criminality, etc. So Quebec has a system in place as well for selecting candidates who want and who intend to immigrate to that province. Think of it like a provincial program. They have their own tailored system where if you get selected by the province, your application goes through and they issue what's called a CSQ. With that, it's the equivalent to that certificate of nomination. We can go ahead and apply for permanent residency with the federal government. There are different programs through Quebec. The more common one and equivalent to the Federal Skilled Worker to Express Entry is the Quebec Skilled Worker Program, which is managed by the platform of ARIMA. So similar to Express Entry, they do award you points for specific factors, but the score here is different. And it's in French is mandatory, except in certain situations. But in order to really increase our scores and being within the selection range from experience, I can tell you that an advanced level of French will be required. These are some of the occupations that have been selected in the past few, I'd say, months and the past few years. The government is really focusing on IT, healthcare, and education. So we have experience in any of these factors and are within the selection range. So combined with previous education and language proficiency, we could have a chance, or we could have a high likelihood of applying for PR through Quebec. And the last program under Quebec that I do want to mention as well, which does not have to do with your previous skill set, it has to do with your actual experience and education in Quebec. So here what we're looking at is first coming as a temporary resident, so coming either as a student or as a worker. In the case of a worker, we need to demonstrate 24 months of work experience. So if we were to come under a closed work permit based on that LMIA supported by the employer, and accumulating 2 years of qualified work experience, not tier 1, 2, or 3, upper intermediate CLB7 of French, then we can consider the PEQ for temporary worker program. And very important as well is if we're being joined by our spouse also has to demonstrate a basic level of French through the accepted French test. And then if we're coming to Quebec as students, we have other two options depending on the level of studies. So we have the PEQ for those who complete diplomas or certificates, which are at least 2 years in length, so 1,800 hours diploma. And after graduation, we need to complete a year and a half, 18 months of work experience with that post-graduation work permit. Again, the requirement for French applies to both, so have that upper intermediate B2 in French. And then if we were to come through a master's or a PhD, we get shortened that work experience that we have to demonstrate. Instead of 18 months, we will have to prove 12 months of work experience in a qualified occupation. These routes seem to be a little longer because of the amount that it will take us to study and acquire that work experience. The program is currently under review and the government is considering, once again, shortening these times. But for now, these are the requirements. We'll see how this changes in the next few months. And I'm right on time. Okay, perfect. So we do have a few questions. I will just quickly walk you through how we can assist you. As Rima said, you don't have to do an application with a consultant, but if you do, just make sure that he or she is licensed and comes with experience to advise you for that. If you're interested in consulting more your case and understanding what are your provincial, federal, or Quebec options to immigrate to Canada, you can book a consultation through our website. We're actually offering $100 discount on our consultations for Lebanese nationals and those who attended today's webinar. So if you're interested, we'll leave our contact details at the end. Feel free to contact us with, what are your questions, what are you looking for, and we'll make sure that we direct you to the right service. And just before we move in, like Rima mentioned,
before you start with the Q&A, I wanted to point out something, that when we do these webinars, what's interesting is that you guys go through a lot of cases. And it's your experience and your knowledge, knowing all sorts of cases that are insightful for us in those webinars. That's one thing. The second thing is that you are the first to know about changes, about trends in terms of, okay, how many Lebanese are they expecting this year? How many Indians are they taking? So it's important because these things affect us. And when we do these sessions, it's an opportunity for us to know what are the trends. How is the wind blowing? Is it for us or against us at the moment? Right. Especially in certain fields, because it's not just about a nationality or filling up a form. It's about also immigration. They want people to come here so that they work, they pay taxes, they contribute to the society. They're not going to take just anyone. So it's important to know what are the trends. And I wanted to point this out because anyone who's interested in immigration, they have to know that it's not an open door. It is hard. It is hard, but it is feasible if you follow through, if you stick to it. And for people who have really difficult cases, I really invite you to benefit from the knowledge of Encubate or any other registered consultant, as you mentioned, Maria, because there's a lot of people who will try to scam you. And that's our role here as SILA. We want you to have the right sources, the right people to guide you through this. You can do it on your own, but if you need help, there are professionals who can help you. So we can move to the questions, but I really wanted to point this out. Thank you.
Thank you, Rima. Thank you. Okay, so I do see the chat popping, so I'm assuming there's questions there, but like we mentioned, we will address the ones that we received for those who registered. First, so I'll just go through them, tackle them. First one, what are the programs to invite parents? Great question. So these falls under the family immigration part that I was mentioning in the first few slides. There are two programs that I want to highlight here. One is the Super Visa program, which allows us to invite our parents, if you're a permanent resident or a citizen of Canada, and can demonstrate certain income in the past year. You can invite your parents to come as visitors through the Super Visa program. This is a visitor visa, but that will allow your parents to come and stay in Canada for up to 5 years as visitors. They won't be able to work, but they can stay here for longer periods of 6 months. In some cases, you know, as they get older, it becomes harder for them to come and go every 6 months. So that's one. And then number two is the actual immigration program for this. It's called the Parent and Grandparent Program. This is a sponsorship process. So, and unfortunately, it's a lottery-based system. So every year, the government will open the opportunity for what we call sponsors, in this case, those who are Canadian citizens or permanent residents in Canada, to submit the expression of interest. And they will pretty much tell the government, I want to sponsor my parents. If they get selected under the lottery draw, which again is completely lottery-based, then they'll get invited to sponsor the parents. And then similar to any other programs that we explained today, we will have 60 days to prepare the application and sponsor them. Processing time for this, it's slightly on the higher end. We're looking at around 18 to 24 months. So that's why the government offers the option of the Super Visa for them to come to Canada and accompany as visitors while the PR application is in progress, okay? Second one, if we're on a visitor visa, and the situation in my home country escalates, can we apply for immigration or PR or only extend our stay? So if you are asking if you're currently in Canada as a visitor, you can extend your stay as a visitor by submitting a visitor record and explain why you want to stay longer. But you can also change your status to worker or student if meeting certain requirements. If you count with a job offer and you meet any of the eligibilities of the codes that we showed earlier, or want to be sponsored by your employer, then you can also switch your status from visitor to worker from inside Canada. And then at the same time, we can explore other permanent residency avenues. Very important to understand that your status in Canada does not necessarily go in hand with your permanent residency. You can be a visitor in Canada and have a PR application on the side. You can be a worker and have that on the side, and they don't necessarily have to be connected with each other. So always make sure to, if you're in Canada, maintain your status while respecting your conditions and authorizations to work and whatnot. All right, how can I turn my work permit and my temporary resident permit to PR? So as we saw today, there are many options depending on the province that you're in. You may qualify under our provincial programs. And most importantly, if you have a recurrent employment, if you have a job offer from an employer who's willing to extend you and support you through the provincial process, we can then also consider this as an option. We would have to look, for example, if you graduated from a public institution, if you can apply under the international graduate stream, international student stream, because that's another great option for most provinces. Or as I said, if you have certain months of work experience and a recurrent job offer, then we can also consider a provincial program. On top of this, we can look at the federal programs and see if your combination of points will give you enough score to be selected under express entry. But as I said, it will really depend on where you graduated from, what type of work permit you have, job offer, and most importantly, what province. Because depending on the province, we can look into different categories of provincial programs. Okay, how can I apply for an open work permit for my spouse, and what is the timeline of the application? Great question. So an open work permit, I'm not sure of the circumstances here, so I'll explain all possible circumstances. Number one would be if we're here as a worker, if we're coming to Canada as a worker or as a student, we can extend that open work permit for our spouse. The student, you need to be enrolled or coming to a public secondary institution, or if you are under a work permit, as a worker in Canada, you need to demonstrate that you are working. It's no longer just on a qualified occupation. We can be working in another occupation as of January of this year, but you need to demonstrate that you are employed and that you are receiving your salary for it. Processing times, it really depends. I know from Lebanon right now, work permits are taking a bit longer. But I'd say anything from 4 to 6 months, it's a realistic deadline. We would have to check on the specifics of the application, and in some cases we can request fast processing if applicable. And then yes.
Just for the last 3 questions, I think we've answered them through your presentation. So let us go to the other questions that are in the chat.
Sure.
And I'm going to start off with, if we are visitors, can we apply for asylum as Lebanon is now in war?
Right. So this is a tricky question. And do
you mind stopping the sharing like this? We can see your face.
Of course. Yes.
Sure.
Let me.
Thank you.
There we go. Okay, perfect. So look, in order for someone to be eligible to request asylum in Canada and request Canada's protection, we need to prove that we have a direct threat towards us personally, as a person. Unfortunately, not as a country. As a country, we need to actually be referred by one of the organizations that Canada works with, and this is a process that's done completely outside Canada. So if we're inside Canada, what we need to prove to the officer in order to request that that status is show that we are being personally threatened and a series of events have taken place against us as a person or as a family. To prove that. So as you can see, this is very sensitive and case by case. We would have to check what are your circumstances, what type of proof you can submit. But unfortunately, it does not apply to countrywide situations if we don't have a specific threat against you personally.
Yes. And thank you for answering that, because sometimes there's this tendency to think, if there's a war, then automatically another country will accept you as you are. But actually, it is case by case.
Exactly.
Especially because a lot of countries are at war. And here in Canada, a lot of people can come from Latin America, and they have problems and they have threats on their lives.
Yes.
Or Ukraine. So it is important to know that we're not that special as Lebanese. A lot of people are suffering and struggling too, so there needs to be a case by case. Exactly. I'll move on to the next question. It is trending now that Lebanese people come to Canada as with a visitor visa, and they try to find a job offer to stay. if they find a job offer and they apply for the work permit, they stay in Canada for more than 6 months until they get the work permit. So the question here, if it exceeds the 6 months, should they leave and come back? Sometimes I see this, they talk about what they call flagpole. No, I don't know the expression, but like you
That's
just go to
another.
yeah. Can you go ahead and explain? Yeah.
Yes. So two terms here to differentiate. If we're here as tourists, right now there's a public policy until 2025 that allows visitors in Canada to change status. Prior to this policy, if someone wanted to apply for a work permit, the application had to be processed outside. Now, by submitting that application from inside, you are entering a status called maintained status. This was previously called as implied status. What this means is that you are entitled, you are allowed to remain in Canada until a decision is made on that application, as long as you submitted it prior to your visitor status expiring. So if it passes those 6 months, as long as we submit it before the 6 months mark came, we are allowed to remain in Canada until that decision is made. However, we need to wait to start working until we receive the work permit. Now, another option that we have, actually not another, I would say in parallel, my recommendation is always to apply online, have the application running, and if you have the chance to go to the border and request your permit to be issued at the office at the border, perfect. However, this does not always work. So officers not always are keen to process these permits, and in most scenarios, you're sent back home. You're not sent back home to Lebanon or your country, but you're just being told, hey, just wait for your application online to be processed. I cannot process this today. Other officers will process it. I really don't know, what's I can't even give you a number right now, but I've seen both.
It's interesting what you're saying, because a lot of cases can be decided by an officer, and sometimes it's like you don't know what's going to happen. Who is going to be the officer waiting for you? We have a lot of questions coming, and I want to make sure that people get the chance to have their own questions answered.
Of course,
because some questions are more generic, and some questions are more let's say specific. So I think it's Naram, I'm not sure, that she asked, can someone apply for a descendant citizenship if your grandparent become a citizen a year after you were born, or is it only in the case of them becoming a citizen before you are born?
Right, great question. I love this one. So I would really have to look at the years because there are different citizenship regulations that got changed throughout the years. But generally speaking, citizenship by descent is only by one generation. So if our parents were not born in Canada, they were already naturalized abroad, we would have to check the specific years to see if they could even pass it on to you. Generally speaking, if let's assume they could pass it to you, and you're mentioning grandparents, so most likely not. But again, I don't want to give you a solid answer without looking at the circumstances. But generally speaking, if they obtain that citizenship after you were born, in most cases, it does not apply, it does not transfer to you by descent.
Excellent. So this question is from Hassan, but I think you can answer by yes or no, because if he needs help, we can accompany him with SILA. So he says, can we turn our visitor visa to PR under FSW while in Canada?
Right. So again, these don't have to do anything with each other. You can be here as a visitor and then check your PR on the site. Why? Because PR under FSW is based on your languages, your experience, your education. So what we would advise is go do the test. You can do that while you're a visitor here. Go do your ECA, get your employment documents. And if you have enough points, then totally, you can apply for permanent residency while here. And as long as you're extending your status, maintaining it as a visitor, these are two completely different processes, but can go hand in hand.
Excellent. Thank you for that answer.
Of course.
So Kathy was saying, I didn't understand very well the steps to turn my work permit to a permanent resident, but I think you just explained it right now. But she has a specific case. She says, I did my validation d'offre d'emploi permanent with the MIFI. So obviously Quebec. So if she already reached that step, what's next for her? And at what point can she turn her work permit into permanent resident? I guess she has to start working first.
Exactly.
But can you give us more info? Thank you.
Right. So having a job offer supported by an employer in Quebec can give you two options that can go again hand in hand. It can give you the option to apply for that work permit, so it gives you status in Canada, you can start working, but then it can also give you points and the opportunity to get invited under ARIMA, under the selection system in Quebec. So again, you may maintain your status as a worker, and in the meantime, wait to receive an invitation from ARIMA. The draws have actually been quite consistent. So if you have the score and you meet with the requirements of the job offer, you can do that on the site. But two different processes that depending on your
But they
goals,
don't competition with one another. That's
correct.
The great thing. Even a member of SILA, Danya, she came here and she was processing her PR at the same time. She came on work permit. So if you want Cathy to reach out to us, we can help you out as well. Charles Mousselem. So he's saying, if you are in Quebec on an open work permit and I have an ongoing PR application under Quebec skilled worker, is it normal to stay in the security check for more than 7 months from medicals passing exams, noting that all steps have been completed as per IRCC? Is it possible to exceed the processing time of the program being 14 months currently? So I guess this is a very specific case, but we would love to hear what's going on. Is there known delays at the moment, or this case of Charles is specific to him?
So look, it is normal. We've seen a lot of delays. There's still a lot of backlog from the pandemic, unfortunately. I know this is almost impossible, especially with all the forms, but try not to compare your case to others. These are two different officers processing your application, and they're completely different in the eyes of immigration. Something that I can recommend is, especially because you are in Canada, submit an ATIP, submit an access to information and report, and privacy report. This will give you access to the officer's notes. So by submitting an ATIP request, I will, Francine, if you have the chance, can you send the link through here so people can access it? Thank you. An ATIP request will give you access to every single step that's been taken on your application so far, and it will give you the chance to be proactive and see if the officer has a note, for example, of, oh, I have questions about his experience or about this specific document. You can be proactive, prepare that, and submit it before he even waits. They have their own internal deadlines, and sometimes they do exceed the regular processing times. So get that ATIP, try to understand what's going on. If everything seems normal, if everything just follows the regular steps, don't worry, it's just unfortunately taking a bit longer.
Thanks, Charles. I hope this helps you out, and keep us posted on your case. It's interesting to know what was the held up, so let us know. Roger Seriani, he's asking, is it easy to find jobs in trades, for example, electrician, if an applicant does not have a degree in that field, but rather many years of experience, knowing that these jobs are regulated in Canada? So different aspects here. So experience versus a diploma, and also knowing that it's a regulated job. So how does it work? Because they need it, but at the same time, they make it complicated.
Yes. So we would have to look case by case. Some provinces do not regulate all trades, so we would have to check which province actually allow you to do that. What I have seen in similar cases like this is getting a simulation that would still have you do the series of skills and responsibilities of that trade, and on the site get your red seal or get that certification that will allow you to then apply for, you know, a close specific work permit or through one of the peer programs. However, if you have the experience in that trade, look into the Federal Skilled Trades Program, because not all trades require you to be have a certificate of qualification, but just require you to have the experience in that trade and have a job offer in Canada. So, as you said, this is highly demanded across all provinces. Check, because not always, especially for immigration programs, not always a certificate of qualification is required.
Excellent. I hope this answers the question, Roger. So we have another question talking about proof of funds. I heard that recently some people in Lebanon, and maybe Francine, you know more about this, they use the cash money as proof of funds and it has been accepted. Can you let us know more about this? Would a wrong proof of funds cause rejection, or will they request additional proof of funds? So it's kind of tricky, but I don't know if you had cases like that.
Sorry, is this question by Najib, the first one
No,
there?
the proof of fund is an earlier question asked earlier on in the chat. So I think it was Danya who asked it.
So, Maria, so I believe they didn't submit bank statements,
Okay.
but instead they probably wrote a letter signed by a notary saying, let's say that they had, I don't know, $10,000 in cash because, you know, of the situation, we're no longer whatever, saving the money in the bank statements, etc. Like, so would that be okay? That's the question.
Honestly, it really depends. There's no really right or wrong here. What I advise clients in this situation is let's do our best to try to fit within IRCC's requirements. If we can't for any reason, we're taking a chance, we're taking a risk, but then we're giving all supporting evidence, like what I was saying earlier. We're providing proof of employment, we're providing tax returns if possible, we're providing as much information as we can to the officer to say, hey, these are the funds that we have available. Unfortunately for this and this, they're not available in the format that you requested. So it's not impossible, but it's up to discretion of the officer. And unfortunately, not all officers are familiar with the situation. Unfortunately, someone on the other side of the world may be checking your application and thinks, what is this? So it's not a right or wrong. What I would advise is try to go as much as you can with IRCC's requirements, and if not, provide supporting evidence documents and notarize affidavits of all these events and documents.
I think to build on what you just said, we can say that as long as you're not lying, as long as you can explain, they are open to listen. And and it's important because they are not disconnected from our reality. They know, but they want to make sure that you are following certain rules. So
exactly,
if you really are someone who has a very logical explanation, don't worry about providing proof with that, and it should be okay. We have a question from Najib. It's 3 questions, so three levels of the question. I'm going to read it out loud. My wife is a permanent resident, but she's not living there at the moment for 2 things. 1, because she can't practice dentistry. I guess she has to get there. And 2, because we don't want to live apart. It's always interesting because the process takes so much time that it's hard for couples to decide what to do. So if we have proof that we are planning to go live there and have proof of funds in her bank account in Canada and in a bank account in Lebanon, which proves that she can provide this to sponsor me. Question 1. Question number 2. Am I able to apply for a work permit as directly if my wife is a permanent resident? I don't think it's related to apply for a work permit if your partner is a permanent. Is it?
No. So first of all, because she's a permanent resident, she cannot sponsor you from outside Canada. So she needs to be physically inside Canada to sponsor you. Now, once she's inside Canada and we submit that application, then you can apply for the work permit. Okay, so after submitting the application for sponsoring, we can apply for your work permit. Now, IRCC is also allowing for applications from outside to apply for open work permits, and they have committed to processing TRVs. So if you need to come to Canada first as a visitor, you can change that status as a worker after being in Canada. They're really prioritizing it for this purpose of family reunification. So take advantage of that. And
yeah, because he's asking what's the right way to do this.
Right.
His wife eventually wants to come, but he wants to make sure first that he has his papers so they come together. So an option is to come here as a visitor and then ask for a work permit or find a job. Or she needs to move here and then apply for him
while he's outside. But in all honesty, I would take advantage because they are really processing TRVs for family reunification. So take advantage of this, and but she has to be physically inside when submitting the application for sponsorship.
So Najib is saying that they both want to go. So I guess it's a question of her coming on her work permit and him coming on a visitor visa, and then trying to find a job, or applying for his sponsorship while they are here. But can she apply for a sponsorship while he is on a visitor visa?
Yep, absolutely. And he can, and then once that application is submitted, the moment after, we submit a work permit application, and we're actually seeing fast processing times. Within 3, maximum 4 months, he'll have his work permit. He'll be able
3
to
months?
work. Yeah, he'll be able to work because it's processing time. He'll be able to work, and then wait for that decision for permanent residence while he can work.
Okay, excellent. Yes, she goes there and you ask for it, but ask for the visit visa maybe before she goes. I don't know.
Yes, no, absolutely. So submit a visitor visa, explain the purpose of it. Once you get it, you both come here. And while being here, the application gets submitted from inside.
Okay. We have a question from Pamela. She said, I already applied for a spouse open work permit since my husband is in Canada already. What is the recent time for my file to be studied? I'm not sure if her husband is on a work permit himself, but what do you expect?
Right. So as I mentioned, if he's here on a work permit and he's working, then it's regular. Yes, okay. She just said he's on a work permit. Okay. So then your eligibility to apply for a work permit most likely applies. Similar to what I mentioned to the other PR application, if it's exceeded the regular processing times, I suggest to submit an ATIP report. In this case, you can't submit it because you're physically outside Canada, but your husband can because he's physically inside. He can submit on your behalf. Submit an ATIP request and see if there are any anything in the report that indicates that the application is taking longer, and if the officer has questions. You can also try to submit a WAC form and request for process for X and X reason. It's been a certain time, but as I said, unfortunately, processing time a little.
I don't know if it's just with me, but you're cutting off a little bit, Maria.
Okay,
it's okay. But we'll just take one last question, or maybe so I'll ask this one, and then we'll take another, and then we'll wrap up. Basically, it's Roger. He's asking, hi again, as a worker visa, is that required? Is it required that my family moves with me? So no, exactly.
It's not required, only if they want to.
So also I want to say that Francine posted the ATIP that you can file if you want to have answers. And she just posted as well the processing times per application. So I think this answers a lot of the questions in the chat. So I'll take the last question from Dania. If someone is coming on a closed work permit and his wife at the same time got an open work permit, is she obliged to come with him directly, or she can follow him after, and after how much time?
She can follow him after, or not at all, as in you can come, you have the option to come with the work permit, and there's no timeline specific to come. No for you to come.
Excellent. So Naham is asking how they can reach out to you. So I think Joelle is going to post your contacts again.
Perfect.
And we're going to put the link for the feedback form. Please fill it up. It really helps us a lot. And you can also contact us as SILA. So you have all the contacts in the chat, so you can let us know anything that you need. Thank you so much for doing this webinar. I think it was very helpful for so many people, and also for the people who will listen to it after when they check the recorded link. I just want to tell you quickly that we have one more upcoming webinar organized by SILA. It's about taxes and budgeting, and I think this topic interests a lot of people who are about to come or who are here. So we're going to debunk a lot of myths about taxes. So if you can join us, it's at the end of November. Also, in terms of what's coming up next for the coming year, we're going to have webinars about real estate, about housing, about budgeting. So many things coming up for us with SILA. I'm just going to thank you again and leave the last, the conclusion for Francine and Maria. Thank you so much for being with us. If you want to say
Thank you.
something for the end.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining. As Rima said, this was, don't feel any obligation to having to proceed with that, but we're open to helping you in any way we can. We hope this was informative for everyone and for future updates and webinars like this that we're journey with SILA. So thank you everyone for joining.
The same. Thank you, everyone. And I hope you have a nice evening. That's it.
Thanks Francine. ما حكينا بالعربي بس
مش كتير.
أكيد لأنه احتراما لماريا بس كمان لأنه unfortunately كل البروسس كل البيبر ووركس بالإنجليزي بقى لازم نقول لكم القصص بالإنجليزي
إنجليزي أو فرنش. So exactly.
بالضبط إنجليزي أو فرنش. Thank you everyone. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.